Okay, this will seriously be my third take of a 30-minute clip to do this inferior function. Within the Aries, I've had technical difficulties galore. Anyways, this is Heather here with Underwater Panther. Please like and subscribe. That will help me be able to do live videos instead of taking 8 hours a night to upload a 40-minute video and then accidentally delete it and then accidentally film it in cinematic or whatever. I cannot edit that for some reason in my app. So like and subscribe, help me get there so I can have live, so I don't have to spend all this crazy amount of memory and uploading for hours upon hours on end. Anyways, I'm going to try to do this again. I'm going to finish this series on Aries. It's like a revamped, newer. I started with Aries. Aries was my first ebook that I created. Anyways, I am going to finish this. It is Libra season now officially, so I'm going to work on Libra after I finish this. I'm going to scroll back up 40 pages. Okay. So, we are getting into the fall for an Aries or Estp, that's the astrology side, and then I will delve into the inferior function with psychology. Alright, so what is the fall? When a planet falls within a sign, it means those things are asleep and barely conscious within the archetype. When a planet falls or is asleep, it can have nightmares or beautiful dreams and everything in between. You can really doubt yourself here or do things you never knew you could before because you were afraid to try. So Saturn is in fall within an Aries or Estp. So Saturn represents how one sees reality, where you gain structure and build structure with people, places, things, or resources, where one places and receives boundaries and restrictions and limitations, how one begins and gains structure in their life, and getting our acts together. So a planet in the sign opposite the sign of its exaltation is said to be in fall. Therefore, contrarily to the exaltation, the planet loses its strength and influence. Saturn doesn't reflect the sun. Although the sun is exalted in Aries, it will remind us that we have to live life on a practical basis and will have to compromise and work with others, not just ourselves. And Aries tends to feel like people are putting them to sleep when others talk about boundaries and all the little details. Saturn types of things feel beneath in Aries. So Saturn is very strong within the ISTJ or Capricorn archetype. I absolutely love skeletons, remind me of the foundational structure. That is what Saturn represents. That is what Capricorn is good at. I have a Capricorn moon and stellium in Capricorn, so I'm all about the little, you know, the mountain goat. The goat, it slowly climbs the mountain regardless of how steep it is, how hard it is. It's the little steps you take to a long-term goal, which Aries cannot stand. They want the here and the now, they live in the moment, and they're all about short-term goals, not long-term goals. So an Aries will have to set aside their passions and deal with practical day-to-day issues and protocol to gain stability. They don't want to put boundaries, restrictions, and limitations on themselves. Saturn can be hardened positively or negatively depending on your own spiritual nature and consciousness. Saturn flows us towards being practical, making sense, building, growth, nourishment, and caring, but is cold. So it's created to be a container within. Cold can be a dryness or non-emotional awareness. Hence why Capricorns are not in tune with speaking about emotions, and neither is Aries. So it can kind of tend to feel very cold. Capricorns are a lot more cold than Aries because Aries is a fire sign, and remember that is all about expressing what they see and feel. So Saturn is a masculine planet and will replace the feminine fulfillment of passion, fire, feeling, or emotions with material, physical things and logic. So Saturn influence, I think I hammered that enough. I'm going to scan over here real quick, make sure I didn't miss anything. So Saturn's dedication to structure and discipline suits order in business and politics, as well as the physical frames upon which our buildings and bodies depend. So the skeleton, for example. Saturn indicates where problems, restrictions, and barriers are likely in our lives and confronts us with the reality of impermanence. But Saturn presides over much more than failure and endings. As the planet of firm foundations, it can show us how to strengthen our endeavors and make them more sustainable. In understanding Saturn, we can make a friend who will never give false hope and will always be there to support us, providing a framework for our progress through life, just as it also presides over the skeletons that our bodies need to stand tall and the foundations that hold up buildings. With Saturn as our guide, we become more powerful by working with and mastering problems. Just a little tiny side tangent. Aries, they're very impatient, and they can tend to not be consistent when that comes to their own long-term goals, when that comes to their own discipline, and when that comes to friendships and partnerships as well. They tend to lack consistency to a degree, which can also play out as them disappearing on you and ghosting people. So that was the astrological, what the fall means, what Saturn represents. Now we're going to go into the psychological portion, explaining what the inferior cognitive function within the Aries ego means. So the inferior function is most likely projected onto others. We're trying to go from an inferior to an aspirational function. The cognitive attitude of the inferior. So this is how you know you're playing out your inferior. This is when we feel lost, like something is missing, when we are repressing. We can become indulgent here, avoidant, use it as a crutch. Can be addictions, fears, insecurities, sensitivities, where we are touchy, defensive, and protective. It can be where our desires are when we're bored. It can be very mysterious, unconscious to us, and it can also play out as blissful, childish, naive, extreme, and delusional, and we tend to work on our inferior function when we are 35 years or so old. So, this is our most painful pressure point within our ego. Remember, we break up the ego into four sides of our ego. We've got the hero, parent, child, and inferior cognitive functions. If you want more in depth on that, check out my other videos prior to this one. This is only going to be the inferior. I had issues with uploading, so here we are. So, it is our nuclear power button when everything is on fire. The inferior is where we find our internal and external issues magnified. Our inferior function is the gateway into our demon function, or astrologically I call it the unconscious superego, when we are triggered. But if we can develop the inferior function and not get triggered, we will begin to develop our subconscious, which can be our ultimate happiness and potential legacy. This is the inferior function, is where our fears and insecurities exist. We tend to cover our insecurities with pride, where we are the most vain, where we can find hatred for other people if they are hammering at our inferior, and this is where we will go immediately to blows. So the inferior function is the most sensitive within our ego and therefore needs to be nurtured consistently. Its closest link to the demon function in our superego interacts. So this is a big interaction here, and can cause us serious problems if we are not careful. So I'm going to scan over a little bitty bit. So the inferior function is the most painful pressure point we have in our minds. If you hit someone in their insecurities, they may have an immediate angry reaction, aka demon mode. In other words, they will go into their unconscious demon function mode in which they most likely cannot control themselves. Each zodiac or archetype or personality type, whatever you want to call it, has different triggers due to cognition and development. So with Aries, they have introverted intuition inferior, which means when they cannot get their acts together and their long-term goals fulfilled, they are going to go into extroverted intuition demon mode. That is an extroverted demon, which means they're going to take it out on everyone else. Now, not every personality type has an extroverted demon mode. Do be aware of that. So we need to get to know our weaknesses here so we can manage our triggers better. Understanding what truly triggers us can allow us to build better boundaries with people and navigate with social grace. So the inferior function is very difficult to control. All one can do is bring awareness to it and practice wielding it every day to make it stronger, like building a muscle. Understanding what triggers us can allow us to build better boundaries, like I said. If your inferior isn't triggered by another person, it could also come from the mental exhaustion due to a variety of reasons, including stress, economic pressures, emotional conflict or turmoil, tough transitional periods of life, dealing with too many challenges at once, or even general fatigue from living a very busy lifestyle. Because of its relative unconsciousness, the inferior function is responsible for many of our childish, naive, extreme, or delusional thought patterns and behaviors. The inferior function is more sensitive and touchy than the other functions in the functional stack. Individuals who push our buttons have usually discovered a way to offend, irritate, or threaten this function. The sort of childish sensitivity and defensiveness associated with this function is closely related to what are commonly described as ego issues: hypersensitivity, ego defensiveness, excessive pride, or self-righteousness, etc. So despite its ability to distort, exaggerate, or idealize reality, the inferior function is still hard to resist because it can be so blissful through strong feelings and infatuation, for example. It can easily become a source of addiction. Like all addictions, it may inspire various obsessive, compulsive, or otherwise unhealthy behaviors. When in the grip of the inferior, we may feel locked into certain moods, attitudes, or behaviors that are not easily escaped. We may also become increasingly narrow-minded, irrational, self-indulgent, and irritable. So like any addiction, what begins with a sense of intense pleasure can eventually take a turn for the worst. According to analytical psychology, repression of mental activities to the unconscious mind tends to produce maladaptive tendencies. The longer and more intense the period of repression, the more likely it is that the boundary between unconscious and conscious breaks down. So I'm not going to get too more in depth with this, but if you want to check that out, it's on page 136 in my ebook. The information is in the description below. I give you advice on how to avoid the inferior grip, what we can do daily to practice self-care in order to help alleviate these issues. Strategies for dealing with the inferior, I go deep into that. So that is the inferior cognitive function. Now I'm going to explain what introverted intuition is. So we are pairing Saturn with introverted intuition as a fall. This is a hard cognitive process for an Aries or ESTP to get the hang of throughout their life. So introverted intuition is a subjective perceiving, taking in. It's an introverted cognitive function. So we're taking in and retrieving information. It also represents willpower, the future for self and one's fate. And I also like to say it is what we desire, what we want for our future. So NI users find stability and imagination and explores with SE. So I will get into the NI-SE axis. So we have the SE hero with Aries and the introverted intuition NI inferior. So you're always going to find introverted intuition with extroverted sensing. It is on an axis. So NI or introverted intuition stabilizes the abstract, narrowing it down. Aries are concrete in their temperament. Remember, they are grounded in reality and facts, so they do not like to abstract ideas. And abstraction can also be paired with strategizing, and extroverted sensing can be paired with being tactical in life. So they like to just take things as they come. So NI-SE, I won't go into that now, I don't want to confuse you too much. So introverted intuition is focused inwards on the internal world of thoughts, ideas, and concepts, as opposed to an extroverted function, which is focused on the world that is external to the mind. So this is an internal process. So rather than gathering information and coming up with conclusions based on the 5 senses, like Aries does, NI dominant types go deeper into processing into their unconscious. This makes an introverted intuition user take longer to respond, and this is noticeable when in discussions. So high NI users tend to take a lot longer processing when it comes to answering questions or even planning for the future. It's very strategic. Aries like to pop off quick at the mouth and a lot of the times they don't think about the consequences. So what does introverted intuition do? It searches for a deeper layer of meaning, looks for hidden patterns and trends, foresees implications and likely results. So Aries are not good at seeing future consequences. They live in the moment. NI is the foundation of strategic thinking, like I said, sees things from many different perspectives, reads between the lines, looks for the unseen ripple effects of current experiences and actions, and looks for symbolism and significance beneath reality. So NI users prefer structure and planning, struggles to verbalize thoughts, may fail to provide context because they're so tunnel vision, and can be very narrow-minded. Now Aries, they are open-minded, they don't like to structure and plan long-term, they're more about the short-term goals, and they don't struggle with verbalizing thoughts very often. So they can have a lot of internal confusion, inappropriate attribution of meaning, and have grandiose vision. Scrolling down here, there's a lot of information. Okay, so this is a pessimistic cognitive function, meaning it takes more energy to use. It has a negative slant. It takes a lot more mental energy for an Aries to try to utilize in a proper manner. This is where their fears and insecurities are and can be very difficult to control. So the inferior NI quotation is, I'm fearful with what I want. Aries can be afraid of the future and won't take action. They can spend a lot of time gathering information and looking at what others are doing. They won't make a decision, and they will tend to have failure to launch syndrome. They can be afraid of wanting the wrong thing, and they will tend to get distracted in the moment and lose track of their end goals. And Leos or ESFPs also have this issue. So when extroverted sensing is not functioning in a healthy manner, SE DOMs, which are Aries, will be more prone to becoming over-reliant on immediate feedback to steer their own actions, becoming overly reliant on external stimulation for personal satisfaction, being careless with decisions or relationships, building up tolerance and numbness for external stimulation, which leaves them drifting aimlessly from one forgettable experience to another, repeating mistakes, neglecting physical or psychological health and well-being, having no focus or clearly defined goals, having no patience to delay gratification for the sake of a greater goal. So in an Aries, this will lead to a buildup of feelings of incompetence, apathy, or insecurity, especially when they gradually lose the will to seek out new experiences or find it increasingly difficult to enjoy life or see value in accomplishments. And let me see. Okay, so I'm going to run through a few bullet points and be done with this video. I have a lot more to go. Okay, so NI inferior in a nutshell. Introverted intuition inferior makes one afraid of the future, so one won't take action. They don't know what they want because they don't want to make bad decisions. They can be very anxious about not knowing what the future holds, so they can be very anxiety prone. People end up understanding the Aries or ESTP because they're very insecure about what they want and about their futures, so they can seem wishy-washy to people. NI can cause failure to launch due to the insecurities. What if I don't want the right thing? What if this doesn't work out? Aries have a lot of those questions in their head, and this can make them stagnant and become worthless. Aries can blow up all kinds of structures here due to fears, insecurities, lack of patience, and lack of living in reality. So a lot of the times they doubt routine, schedules, practical reality, and can run from those things. Aries wants to see the meaning and reason behind those things, not just what people are saying or doing. They may feel being stable and structured with boundaries is beneath them or holding them back. They can also push other people's boundaries too far. Aries needs to realize how self-consumed they can be when stuck in the introverted narrow focus while tasking on projects or even mundane things. If they become more relatable and involve others, they won't feel or be doing said projects alone all the time. They don't like to ask for help and express emotions, for example. They can have a hard time paying attention to details due to wanting to get things done in a quick fashion. If they speed demon through things, they will be half-assed, which will crush their ego anyways. Aries normally feel like they can do whatever they want to do, and Aries or ESTP feel like they can go somewhere without any gas just because they have the spirit. They'll get bogged down when people tell them what to do and feel like people want to stop them and hold them back. They can look at Saturn qualities like they don't want to do that right now. So because introverted intuition is abstract and in inferior cognitive function, it is very difficult for an Aries to abstract into the future. They think it isn't practical or in the here and now, so they can really get tripped up there. So they can get afraid of what they want, so they will constantly research what others are doing, and they will get stuck in non-action. And this is why they really have a fear of not having freedom of choice the most. Like, taking their freedom away is the worst thing you can do for an Aries. That will give them even more anxiety here, which they already have a ton of anxiety. Do not box them in physically, mentally, you name it. It is not a good thing to do. All right, I think that is enough for now. There are many, many pages left. left, but I think I am ready to wrap this one up. And there's positive and negatives to everything, so I do also include the positive aspects of how this plays out. Anyways, like and subscribe. I hope you like this video, and I will see you in the next one.